well. You know, when you're thinking about your hormones, whether things are moving faster or slower than we'd like them to, generally it's going to be related to the same factors. So it's going to be stress, blood sugar, um, inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly genetics. It's the same things that are driving it. So if you're trying to support your menopause, especially in the earlier days in perimenopause, it's better to look more holistically at the body as a whole.
Well, welcome to Your Body's Way. I am so happy to introduce everyone. Oh my gosh, I'm just so happy to introduce everyone to Charlotte Hunter. We've just been having such a nice chat, and it's been really nice getting to know you in literally the last 10 minutes. It's been so nice.
Got to remember to press the record button.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just double check. Actually,
I haven't pressed record.
Yeah, actually, I'm just double checking that now. Like,
oh yeah,
just
you
to
have.
make
You
sure.
have to worry.
Have I?
Don't
Okay,
worry.
perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
that's usually my trick. I usually forget to press it, and I'm like, ah.
I also, when I know I've done something, I feel like I need to always go back and double check as well, even though I know I've done it. So that's the record button situation. Yeah. Okay, so I am just so excited about today's topic because it's something that is so important, and it's something that every woman needs to know about. And whether we know enough about it, I don't know. I don't know if we know enough about it. And the topic of today is perimenopause. So I just want to kind of, first of all, just give everyone a kind of idea of who you are, because I've been following you for quite some time, and I've just always sort of admired the work that you do, and the number of times I've been tempted to join your Dutch hormone test masterclasses. Like I've always been tempted. And that's why I'm so glad that you're on this podcast, so I can get some one-on-one time with you, and everyone can kind of hear from you. So just let everyone know who you are and what you're all about.
So I'm a nutritional therapist and functional medicine practitioner, very much like yourself. I specialize exclusively in menopause. So the only clients I work with are ladies really from those early stages of their hormones going a bit wonky to then possibly thinking they may be perimenopausal, then knowing that they're definitely perimenopausal, and then all the way through to really being out the other side of it and being postmenopausal. So although menopause sounds like a really, really specific area, it's actually most women from their late 30s onwards. So right. It's quite a huge area. I work with clients one-to-one. I do group work, and I also do a lot of work with practitioners. So training around lab testing, particularly the Dutch test, which I love.
Me too.
And I do some mentoring as well. And I also run Menopause Mastery Practitioner Group, which is all about really helping other practitioners learn to be a menopause nutritionist.
Nice. So I'm really curious, what made you want to focus on menopause?
So I think it was all sort of accidental / universe intervention / this is kind of becoming more of a thing now. But I realized back in sort of the end of 2018 that the vast majority of my clients fell into that group or that demographic. And it wasn't really a conscious decision. It was like, oh, that's interesting. And then later that year, I was invited on a retreat, which is a menopause retreat, through a friend of mine, because someone had dropped out last minute. And I went along that thinking, wow, it's amazing. Again, hadn't really thought that menopause was going to be my thing, but I had a brilliant week. An amazing group of ladies, just really engaged, really interested in their health, their nutrition, and just sort of at that point where they're just ready to be as well as they possibly can. And then shortly after the retreat and the following year, I actually had a surgical menopause. So I had a hysterectomy. I think all women have a hormone story. You know, I always say it's either your fairy tale or your hormone horror story. But it's certainly interesting, isn't it, from you know, as we progress through our, I suppose, our hormone life stages. And in my case, I literally had everything wrong with my reproductive organs, from, you know, PCOS, endometriosis, adenomyosis, you know, precancerous cells, painful periods. I mean, literally everything apart from fibroids. That's the only thing I don't have I suppose, the badge for, but everything else was a problem. And it's got to the point where there was just so much going on that the abnormal cells was the thing that sort of tipped the balance. And I was recommended to, well, I wasn't really recommended, I was told to have a hysterectomy. So going through surgical menopause, or having a hysterectomy where they also remove your ovaries, you just go from having, you know, the perfect, well, I say perfect, you know, hormones of a 44-year-old to nothing overnight.
Right.
You know, you're just straight on the menopause roller coaster, or, you know, elevator, or, you know, but it's all going down. So I think that was just another sign. I thought, yeah, I think menopause is actually going to be my thing. And I think over that time of those few years, and certainly up to the point I'm at now, everything I've done has been focused on and around menopause clients, learning about menopause, and also my own experiences from, you know, good, bad to the ugly.
I think yeah, as a therapist, to have some empathy for your clients, to have walked the walk and to have been through what they're going through is a really powerful thing, and it allows you to connect with them so much better. Do you feel like if you knew the things you know now, do you think things would have been better for you growing up and kind of coming into your health, based?
I think so, but you've also got to be realistic. You know, as a 20-year-old living, working in London, you know, loving life, would I've traded that for, you know, the sort of perfect lifestyle, perfect diet? Well, no, probably not. I know that's probably not the right thing to say in my position, but I think we have to be realistic. And actually, I got into nutrition in my early 20s anyway. So I think I did start making a lot of change. I mean, you know, and as a young child, again, I don't know what difference it would have made, because it's more to do with your parents, and just blame your parents, eh?
That's when in doubt, just
perfect.
blame your parents.
That's
exactly.
Perfect get out jail card, isn't it? But I don't know. I mean, I think would it have been different? Probably not. You know, because I really was quite conscious of my health. You know, but equally, you know, you have to live your life, don't you? You have to experience things. And I suppose now I know that some of those things I did probably weren't the best for me, but hopefully there wasn't any long-term damage.
I mean, the reason why I love this topic so much is because I think when you're a teenager, when you're in your 20s, you naturally you're living your life, you know, you don't really care about your health. Like, it's not a big thing as it is when you kind of reach your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. And to know that you can actually switch on your awareness of your health, and you can start to live better from your 30s, you can actually kind of pull back some of the health damage that you probably caused growing up. And you can start to correct things in time for when perimenopause kicks in, which not many women actually know about. And I just want to kind of kick off with a story, because I was speaking to one of my friends yesterday just by chance, and she's in her mid-40s, and but she went into perimenopause at age 36, but she had no idea what was happening. So her symptoms were severe anxiety. Like, she would just wake up in the morning, she'd be like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I feel like I've got a bus on my chest. I don't know what to do. Hot flushes and brain fog. And she was just so confused. She didn't know what it was. The doctors didn't, you know, they didn't really have much information for her. And she just went through like the rest of her 30s thinking there was just something wrong with her. And, you know, she just had depression or anxiety. But it wasn't until she went to the doctor in her 40s, and they were like, actually, I think that, you know, she tested her hormones, and they said, you know, you might actually be in perimenopause. You might actually be, you know, getting started with it. And she was like, gosh, she was telling me yesterday how she had no idea it was coming. She says women need to know more about what it's like for some women, and to maybe expect that some things might start to go wrong from your late 30s. But that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because obviously, you know, perimenopause can kick in from the late 30s. But I guess I want to kind of dig into, does it have to be this big experience of like anxiety and hot flushes, and like, does it have to be this kind of almost like a car crash of a experience, or can it be a fairly steady one? So that's kind of what I want to, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because, you know, going back to what I said about everyone having their own hormone story, which is really the way that I talk to practitioners as well. So when you're talking to your clients, you have to think about that story, or i.e. their timeline. You know, how did they get to where they are in their menopause? So for example, you know, think about your friend, you know, yes, it was happening in her 30s, and by the time she got to the doctor in her 40s, but what was happening before that? You know, what's
Correct.
happened with her hormones, her stress? I mean, stress is a massive one. And again, linking back
Stress
to what
is
I was
number
saying,
one,
or
right? Like,
or the question you asked me about, you know, would I have changed anything? Would I have lived life differently? Would have, you know, if I knew what I know now? But I think, you know, it's not so much the diet and the supplements; it's the stress. I think that's the really,
I
really
second
big
that.
factor. And if you think about, you know, your clients, you know, probably, you know, in a slightly younger bracket than mine, or some of them might be, they might not be perimenopausal, or they might not be, you know, anywhere near menopause, but they've got wonky hormones. And that's a really unscientific way of terming it, but
it's
you know,
relatable.
Think about, you know, those cycles where we go, what happened? Why have I had 24? Why have I had a 24-day cycle? Or why have I had a 35-day cycle this month? Why is my period heavier this month, or more painful this month? Or why was I spotting? Why have I got loads of spots on my chin? Why do I feel like my hair's getting thin? You know, it's very easy to just go, oh, it must be perimenopause, or it must be, you know, your estrogen dropping or whatever. It could be due to loads of different things. And you know, you'll know all about this. You know, it could be your thyroid, it could be from stress, it could be someone's gut health, it could be migraines, not sleeping. You know, it could be all these different factors. So I think it's trying to navigate all of that before you suddenly think, oh, must be perimenopause, I've got to go and get hormones from my doctor. And I'm not dissing HRT, because I have HRT, I love HRT, and I'm never giving it up ever.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my
ground.
Yeah,
to get it off me.
that was going to be one of my questions about what you thought of it. So I kind of already get your take on that then.
Yeah. But I think it depends on the person, doesn't it? You know, there's no one size fits all solution for menopause. And actually, some women can't take HRT. Some absolutely don't want to take HRT. It's nothing to do with any risk or, you know, worries or anything. They just don't want to be a slave to a medication.
Right.
And others will want to embrace it wholeheartedly.
So, I mean, we've been kind of throwing all these terms around, but let's kind of talk about what perimenopause actually is. So can you kind of give a breakdown as to what's actually happening to a woman when she's going through perimenopause, so that anyone who is going through it can actually visualize what's happening to them at this stage? So talk us through what perimenopause is.
Okay, so I'm going to keep it really, really brief, because I could easily just go on and on and on and on and on. So I think first of all, you have to look at what menopause is before you try and define what perimenopause is. And one of the difficulties we have is that the definitions are quite broad and a bit fuzzy around the edges, and a bit grey, or shades of grey rather. You know, they all sort of blend in. But menopause is technically 12 months after your last menstrual period. And there isn't a test for menopause, there isn't a test for perimenopause. it's generally all based on symptoms and that all important last period.
Yeah.
So once you get 12 months past your last period, that's when you can, you finally get your menopause medal. You're there. Doesn't mean you're going to stay there.
Like
you might
that.
suddenly have another random period, or but generally speaking, it's when periods are kind of done.
I love menopause medal, by the way. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. It's because isn't it a time that women fear, but actually it's not a time to
Yeah.
fear. It's like, you can still live your best life, and life doesn't
Yeah.
stop there. Your menopause medal.
No, and it can be challenging, and I suppose that, well, I'm technically postmenopausal now, and I don't always get it right. Some days I'm like, what is going on? What has happened to me? I'm not some perfect menopause guru who just sort of sits there preaching in my ivory tower, while I'm merrily gobbling my HRT. It's not quite like that. There are some, really awful days and some brilliant days, but on the whole, it's, as you said, it's not something to be feared or scared of. Perimenopause is a funny one because, once upon a time it was like a few months before your last period, whereas now we know that it's anything up to 10 years before your last period.
That's
so
insane.
There isn't really like a set definition, but as you go through your hormone career, let's say, you things start changing. You might have more cycles where you're not ovulating, and you might notice that your progesterone is dipping when you have those imbalances. Your estrogen starts bouncing around. So some months you've got crazy high estrogen, another month it's tanking. And it's the problem with perimenopause is that you're sort of on this roller coaster where your estrogen is just kind of going up and down, up and down, up and down. It's very erratic. And that's really where the symptoms are coming from. So if you think about it, every single cell, or just about every single cell, organ, system in your body has got estrogen receptors. So if your estrogen is wobbling around, your progesterone's wobbling around, so you haven't got those beautiful waves that we experience during, your typical cycle. It's going to affect you all over your body from head to toe. So that's why people talk about brain fog, not being able to remember where your keys are, anxiety, stress, not sleeping. Skin can change. You might notice more wrinkles, or itching.
Because estrogen's kind of in charge of those really typical feminine features and qualities, like beautiful hair, beautiful skin, those lovely curves. And so when that starts to drop, then all of those kind of qualities start to kind of come away. But it's interesting because estrogen kind of has a bad reputation a lot of the time. People kind of throw around the idea of estrogen dominance and it being the cause of a lot of health issues, but actually estrogen in the right balance is the feminine hormone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, to quote my good friend Dr. Terry Long, who you should speak to her. She'd be a good one about skin, perimenopause and skin. Dr. Terry always talks about estrogen being your diva hormone, because it makes everything juicy and feminine, and
I love
that. It's great, isn't it? And then she talks about progesterone as being your reliable best friend. Calming, reliable best friend. And then testosterone, I think she said it's like your sleazy boyfriend. Great in small doses, but you don't want too much. I might have got that completely wrong, but it's kind of along those lines. I'm sure Dr. Terry will put me right. But it's the dance of all three, isn't it? You can't just have one.
And the thing is, your ovaries produce those. So your ovaries are in charge of kind of producing those hormones. So when your ovaries start to shut up shop, and they're kind of like, okay, so I'm done now, like I'm kind of stepping out, then those hormones start to, they have to come from other places, and the levels start to drop overall. So all of those hormones that gave you drive, femininity, vivaciousness and vitality, they start to drop away during that time. And
it's, you know, I think as well, you know, menopause isn't just about estrogen, you know, it's bearing in mind that we have got those other hormones. But I think, you know, just back to your original question, the challenge in perimenopause is everything just bouncing around and the unpredictability. You know, you don't really know what you're going to get, and it's like you know, rolling a snowball at the top of a ski slope, chucking it down and then see what comes out the other end. You know, you don't know what you're going to find. You know, it's like, well, so yeah, it's a really changeable time, which is the challenge, which is sometimes like it's very difficult for the penny to drop and go, oh, maybe this is perimenopause, or oh, is it something else?
So on that point, what sort of clues should women be looking for when it comes to perimenopause?
I think changes to your period,
Mm-hmm.
the cycle, length of cycle, any changes in the type of bleeding or pain or anything that's just unusual, and you start seeing a pattern of unusual. And by pattern, I don't mean the same thing every month, but just weird stuff happening every month. Other symptoms, or the classic symptoms, are anxiety seems to be the big one in perimenopause. You know, just that feeling of overwhelm, as you said before, anxiety, feeling of stress, just go, oh, why does everything feel so much more challenging than it did before? And actually, I mean, what I find personally, when I don't quite get my HRT right, it's a feeling of overwhelm and and something sitting on your chest, that sort of like, oh gosh, you know, and then but it takes me a few days to go, I forgot to change my patch, or you know, I'm a bit, you know, working quite hard this week. I probably needed a little bit more estrogen to get me through it,
because
you know, so
it's I mean, that's because I was just going to say, because we really don't realize how much our hormones play into our mood, like how much. So you just described that situation there with the patch, but like, let's just even look at the menstrual cycle. Like you have the middle of the cycle where you're just like, I think I'm just going to put on my red lipstick today, and you're just like, you're posting lots of videos on Instagram and your hair's looking lovely, and just like, and then, you know, you get to the week before your period, and then, you know, you start to feel really, you know, bad about yourself, and you just want to kind of hide away and
bloated
and it's my husband, like, he drives me crazy, but he's right though. I can't I can't say that he's wrong, but I always pick a really aggressive, unreasonable argument with him every month before my period, and he's always like, are you due? And I'm like, no, but really I am. I'm like, that's not the point. Like, I really am angry. This is a real thing. And then the next day I'll be like, oh God, that was my hormones. So it's incredible how much those hormones are in charge of your mood. So when you're feeling stressed and you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because the hormones, like, they're dropping, and you're just finding it tough to deal with, you know, daily life. So I get that totally.
And I mean, same for me actually. You know, Mr. Hunter will say, I'll go, oh, you know, I've screwed up my estrogen, or I should have. He's like, well, I could have told you that. You know, it's like, you know, it's like he's like Mr. Hormone expert there. Exactly. Although to be fair, I think he is now a menopause expert. So he could probably, I could probably start rolling him out for the podcast, couldn't I? But I think it's difficult to say what's your number one sign, because I mean, if you look at a lot of the forums, or, you know, websites or Instagram pages where they do the question, you know, what was your first sign of perimenopause? I mean, hundreds and hundreds of different signs and symptoms. It's like, you know, when you know, it's quite a long time for me now since I was Googling things about pregnancy. It's like when you start getting paranoid, going, oh my God, am I pregnant? And you start Googling, what was your first sign of pregnancy? I mean, it's everything from, my bacon tasted a bit funny this morning, to, you know, my hair was falling out. You know, it's just like completely random stuff.
The symptoms are so unique to each person. But
go on.
Oh,
sorry. I was just going to say, I think the best bit of advice I could give is just keep an eye on your cycles. And I think really women should probably pay more attention to their cycles rather than just waiting for the next period. Just, you know, keep a note in your diary of things that happen, or things that you you're aware of that happen in your cycle. From when, you might, like some people, women get twinges a few days before, other women will get, much more cervical mucus at different points, the number of days, all the different things, clues and symptoms and just patterns that you see. I think it's worth just checking in and being aware of them and knowing your body, I think.
So is there a way to go into perimenopause in the best way possible? Like, is there a way you can just kind of float your way through? Is it possible?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's difficult to say, gosh, we could just float into perimenopause. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? There will be people out there who will say, yes, you can do that. No, you don't need HRT. It's all in your mind. You can, meditate, breathe, and stretch your way through menopause, and I'm sure we've all seen those pages or accounts on Instagram that say just that. If it was that easy, well, menopause wouldn't really be a thing, but it is a thing because the fundamental facts are your estrogen is dropping as nature intended for it to drop. So what can we do to protect our bodies, improve our longevity, and enjoy the rest of our lives, or the second half of our lives, almost, for most people?
Yeah.
But I think in terms of reducing the impact of that change, or shift rather, because I never ever want to hear myself saying the change. It's like a swear word. No. It's really looking after your blood sugar.
That's it. That's the cornerstone.
Look after your blood sugar. And I think blood sugar, there's more to blood sugar than just your glucose. So people are obsessed with continuous glucose monitors. Yeah, they're great, they're interesting, but actually that's only one teeny tiny part of the story. We need to be thinking about all of our cardiometabolic markers, so cholesterol, triglycerides, there's a great long list of them.
And blood sugar
insulin. Blood sugar is just part of that.
Is a massive part of that, and insulin regulation. And so, I mean, let's kind of dig into that bit, because so you'll always experience symptoms going into perimenopause, but there are ways that you can make it as pleasant as you can for yourself. So that's what I want to dig into. And you say that a massive part of that is regulating blood sugar. So
absolutely.
Why is that? What's the connection there between blood sugar and worsening symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a lot to it, but the main, I think that the part to really focus on is that as we transition through perimenopause and menopause, we naturally become more insulin resistant. So the signals that tell our cells to utilize sugars becomes much less effective, and we don't hear those signals as well. So it's very easy for our blood sugar to go a bit haywire. The second part to it is that when we're stressed, also our blood sugar is put under pressure, and we get in those vicious cycles of binging on sweet stuff, wanting more sweet stuff, binging on sweet stuff, and then our insulin response also reduces. So I think thinking about those two things, really checking in with your insulin and your response to sugar will overall help your metabolic function as you go through menopause.
Yeah.
And it's something that all of us can do quite easy. I say quite easily, it's not easy. I think the how to do it is easy, or the instructions of how to do it, but actually doing it is quite challenging.
Living the life, actually keeping your blood sugar levels is a challenge day to day, especially when you're stressed, which you said raises blood sugar, and obviously the diets that we have doesn't help either. So it's hard day to day to keep blood sugar levels regulated. But it's a key part of making this process as easy as possible for yourself.
Absolutely. So I think it's a real balancing act between managing your stress and managing your blood sugar. And it's about starting somewhere. It's not about just going totally cold turkey on sugar or carbohydrates. I think reducing or controlling your carbohydrates as well is an important part of that. And I'd say most menopausal women that I work with do better on a lower carb diet, and reducing their sugars.
I definitely want to come back to that point, but I just wanted to say something that I heard recently, and I can't forget it. When you're stressed, it's like eating a cookie. That's what I heard, and it's a really good analogy because it just kind of lets people know that, you know, you really need to look after your stress levels, because when you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, whose job is to release sugar from its stores, put it into the bloodstream to be used for energy. So it's basically like it ups your blood sugar levels, and it's like eating a cookie, but you don't actually get to have the pleasure of eating a cookie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going through perimenopause is a really key time to kind of go inward and start looking at your lifestyle, looking at you know, what's stressing you out, and starting to you know, take it easy on yourself and be kind to yourself is so important. But then also looking after your diet, and, you know, trying to stay away from sugar as much as possible. What's your view on things like caffeine, alcohol for women at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think caffeine is very, very individual. I mean, because you have people who will have a cup of decaf and will be like spinning. And then you get people who can have 3 espressos before bed and manage to sleep right the way through. You know, so I think it's very, very individual. And I think that's a call you've got to make for yourself. I don't think there are any hard and fast rules on caffeine. It depends on how you metabolize the caffeine, really. I think most people, speaking generally across the, you know, population, would probably do better on less caffeine. And it's a bit like the invisible cookie you're talking about. You know, caffeine's the same. You know, you can drink a cup of coffee and you're going to get a blood sugar hit from it and a bit of a buzz, but you're not going to have the enjoyment of actually eating the cookie or the cake. You know, it's sort of stimulating that response. My advice to my clients is have up to 2 cups per day, and have them at the time of day you most enjoy them. And if you feel like you need the caffeine, you're drinking too much.
Yeah, agreed.
So have it with food as well can help. So with breakfast or with lunch.
I have a really crazy caffeine story. So I love coffee. Like I'd have one every morning, maybe even 2. But when I say 1 or 2, I mean mugs, like big mugs of coffee. And I was always fine until about a year ago, before I was pregnant with my last child, my son. I found that every time I would work, I would get dizzy, like really, really dizzy, to the extent where I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't carry on today. And that was happening every day. And it was really stressful because I'd sit down in the morning, have my coffee, work away, have a great, you know, get lots of work done. But then I knew I had a time limit. I was like, I know I have like about 3 or 4 hours to get stuff done before I start to get really, really dizzy. And do you know what? It took me over a year to figure out that actually the caffeine was affecting me, like it was actually starting to cause the dizziness. And I didn't realize that because I've been drinking caffeine for so many years beforehand. But how things change, and like if you add stress on top of stress, like the work stress and maybe just having too much coffee, it really started to play around with my stress response. So as soon as I took caffeine away, literally about a couple of weeks ago, I haven't been dizzy at all since. So it's crazy. So for me, caffeine was fine at one time, but now it's not fine. So I think also people need to be aware that it depends on how you metabolize it, but then also just your lifestyle at the time, like, and maybe some other things that you don't really necessarily understand about your body, but it just is. Just be aware of how caffeine responds to you, because it can change apparently. So I've learned recently.
And it can creep up on you as well, like you said there. But and also I think a lot of clients or people don't realize how good they feel off caffeine, you know, until they give it a few weeks. because you might think you don't have a problem with caffeine and it doesn't affect you at all, and then you stop, you're like, oh, I felt a lot better. I didn't feel as tired, sleeping better. It's in relation to menopause. Yeah, stop getting the hot flushes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important. I think alcohol is probably more of a big deal.
Think about alcohol. Yes, talk to me about alcohol.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to be the one to spoil the party.
I've spoiled many parties. Trust me. Trust me. I've had many clients who are like, "Oh, really? Seriously? Like, not even like this many a week?" I'm like, "No."
Yeah. I mean, it's a really difficult one, I think, to navigate. But a lot, I'd say most ladies I work with feel better when they stop drinking. When they stop, if they go in a bit of a mini detox, and I'm not going to drink for 30 days, or they do dry January or no booze November, or whatever, whatever people do, they will get or they'll get a noticeable improvement in their menopause symptoms. And that can be perimenopause as well, or even just wonky hormone phase.
Yeah.
And obviously people can make their own choice, but I think my advice would be just avoid alcohol, and get out of the routine. So it's like the kids go to bed, have a Prosecco, and then you have one. It's like, well, if I don't drink the whole bottle, it'll go flat. Of course, I'm not speaking from experience.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But it's, there's, I think you've got to have those light bulb moments yourself. I mean, I suppose my example it's just suddenly come to my thoughts, is when I was pregnant with my first son, I just could not work out why I was getting heartburn the entire time. And he was born in the April, and it was really, really bad in December. And I kept saying, I don't know what's going on. I feel terrible. And my mum came to stay with me, and she said, you know what? I don't know whether I'm right, but I think it's all the mince pies you're eating. I was like, what? But I always eat mince pies. I love mince pies. They're my own mince pies. There's nothing bad about them.
Defense
sure
mode.
Enough, it was the mince pies. And as much as I love those mince pies, I just stopped eating them, and hey presto.
See, like one time it's fine, and then next time
exactly.
Like, that's the key. That's a key message here. Like, just be aware of the fact that your body agrees with something and then it doesn't. But then with alcohol, that kind of leads to like a little arm of this conversation, which is the term estrogen dominance, which women can encounter going through menopause, right? Because when estrogen becomes dominant to progesterone, that can cause a heck of a lot of symptoms in itself. So I know when women are cycling, it can, equal terrible, PMS and clotty periods and heavy, tender breasts. And so, but you can actually become estrogen dominant during the perimenopause process because, like you said, wonky hormones.
Yeah.
But then there's the alcohol estrogen issue, link there, that it can contribute to estrogen dominance, right?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think we have to take a step back. I think there's two things have popped up from what you've just said. The first one is that we have to look after our livers. Our livers are responsible for metabolizing, detoxing estrogens. And other hormones in the body. So we have to look after our livers. And if you're drinking lots, your poor liver takes the hit, because however you look at it, alcohol's poison. And I'm not being all high and mighty about booze at all. But if you look at the actual facts, I think the other side of that is when it comes to estrogen dominance, I'm not sure I really like that phrase. I know it gets thrown around a lot, but I mean, what does it actually mean? Estrogen dominance. It's like, if you think about what does it actually mean? But I think that the real issue is not the estrogen dominance, it's the changing ratio of your estrogen progesterone.
Yeah, the balance.
It's the movement and the balance of hormones that is probably a more useful way to look at it than looking at estrogen as being the bad guy. Because really, you want to hang on to that estrogen as long as you possibly can. Exactly. It can be as dominant as it likes. But again, it's the balance, and it's how well you're clearing those hormones out of your body.
Precisely. So liver health and gut health, that's where these
Yeah,
two things come
definitely.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're sort of working our way through the body,
Yes, we
aren't we? So we started with, thinking about blood sugar and
yeah.
stress, anxiety, your brain, and
Now we're
now
kind
we're
of
kind of
working our
down
way
the
down.
back end.
Yeah. Down literally the back end.
Yeah.
So I mean that kind of brings me on to some recommendations then, some natural recommendations to help clear estrogen, but then to also just make to stabilize your hormones as much as possible. So what sort of foods would you recommend? What sort of supplements do you usually give? I mean, I know everyone's different, but do you have some favorites that you like to recommend?
I do. So when it comes to perimenopause and menopause, my thoughts are always, try and steer away from menopause products, because they tend to be what I call kitchen sink formulas, where they've literally got everything in. And does every woman need every single thing that you're going to find in there? Probably not. Some of the ingredients, like black cohosh, anecdotally, it's great for hot flushes, but the studies are a bit shady. They're not particularly robust. The same with things like sage, we find in a lot of supplements. Then you've got phytoestrogens, but if you're in perimenopause, maybe do you really want to be adding more phytoestrogens into the mix? Maybe, maybe not. So I think there's a lot of stuff in those formulas that might not be that helpful. And if we're thinking about the bigger picture of menopause and perimenopause, and about what I said relating to blood sugar and stress and mood and gut and detox, I steer more towards blood sugar supporting supplements and stress supporting.
Nice. You're kind of starting at the top,
and
then it trickles down.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're less stressed, if your mood is better, your gut function will be better. Your blood sugar is going to improve. And there's one particular product that I really like called New Mind Wellness.
Okay.
Really good. So have a Google, because it's a really good product. So it's like a multivitamin for stress, but it seems to it's almost a perfect perimenopause and menopause product as well, because it's all about blood sugar and working on the stress response. So it has, rhodiola, ashwagandha, I think there's a teeny bit of lemon balm in there, B vitamins, zinc, vitamin D, magnesium. It's a really lovely all-round product. And they also have a product that's got some extra probiotics in as well for gut health. So although it's not labeled as a menopause product at all in any way, shape or form, I found it by accident, looked at the label, thought, this is just the perfect menopause product. So I started recommending it to friends and my clients, and the feedback's been great.
Good to know.
Especially around sleep and stress. So I think my way of thinking about supplements is more broad-minded, I think. Thinking about the bigger picture and thinking about those factors. And I say this to practitioners as well. When you're thinking about your hormones, whether things are moving faster or slower than we'd like them to, generally it's going to be related to the same factors. So it's going to be stress, blood sugar, inflammation, and possibly genetics. It's the same things that are driving it. So if you're trying to support your menopause, especially in the earlier days in perimenopause, it's better to look more holistically at the body as a whole. And I think the same applies with dietary advice. We know that a modified Mediterranean diet has got the best research. Anecdotally, a low-carb Mediterranean diet works most of my clients.
And I just wanted to kind of come on to that, because you mentioned low carb, and that makes total sense, because that manages your blood glucose levels. Like that will target that straight off the bat. So I mean, I suppose that allows for foods like like vegetables and
Yeah.
lots of good quality proteins and good quality oils and fats.
Mm.
I'm a huge fan of the cruciferous vegetables. I mean, aren't they just
Yeah,
a recommendation for
absolutely.
almost everyone for every
Yeah,
issue that
yeah,
they have?
yeah, yeah.
But in particular, they're so good at helping to clear away estrogen.
Hmm.
And one of my favorites is broccoli sprouts. Now, I always feel really proud when I can get hold of some in the supermarket, and I'm always like, "Look, guys!" I'm kind of posting this broccoli sprouts because, like, they're kind of bitter to taste, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
But I'm just like taking it out by the handful and just kind of chucking it in, just
yeah.
almost like a supplement, like a health supplement. So I'm a big fan of broccoli sprouts and all of that. But
Just chuck them on anything.
yeah, chuck on anything.
Quite
Um,
literally.
yeah. But I'm a big fan of fasting. So I have a fasting program at the moment, and I know people have
Mm.
different opinions on fasting. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on it and whether you ever find a place for it with your menopause clients.
Yeah, I think fasting fits with that low carb
Mhm.
lifestyle anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're not haven't got that huge challenge of being um a slave to carbs,
Hmm.
like a carb monster, that as soon as you don't eat for a couple of hours, you're like on the floor and you can't manage.
Yeah.
So I think fasting does fit with that.
It's a good
But I
way to
think,
undo that. Yeah.
yeah, but I think that the degree of fasting or the type of fasting might vary person to person, which,
Yeah.
I'm sure um fits with what you do as well. Um, I think if I've got a lady who is absolutely in the thick of really, really, really bad symptoms, um, I don't think fasting would be quite right
Mm.
at that moment. But I think you can integrate some form of time restricted eating in some way into anyone's diet.
Yeah.
So even if someone's totally in the thick of those symptoms, I still might say to them, I don't want you to eat um, for 5 hours between meals.
Yeah.
So have a really big breakfast and a really, really decent
Mm.
lunch, and then have their evening meal. If their work day is very long, they might need a small structured snack or a
Mm.
mini meal in the middle of that, or they might need something before bed if they're not sleeping very well. But trying to space out their meals is a really easy way to fit some kind of fasting into their day.
It's a great way
You
to
know,
get to start. It's a great starting
yeah,
point to
yeah,
kind of get someone
yeah,
warmed up to it. But I
yeah,
agree. When you say someone's in the thick of their symptoms, fasting is a stress on the body. So if you're calm and you're
mm,
not feeling stressed, then fasting is a really nice thing to start to implement into your life. But the moment you have a lot of emotional stress and then physical stress, if you then put on another stress of fasting, then you could really get the nasty tail end of what fasting
yeah,
can do.
yeah,
And that's what's important for people to know when they fast, like just recognize how much stress you're under, and
mm,
just make a wise decision as to whether it's something you need
yeah,
to do. But like you said, having like 5 hours in between meals is safe and it's doable
mm,
for basically most people.
yeah,
So I think that's a really nice way to get someone into it.
yeah. Because I mean, my approach to low carb and fasting and intermittent fasting and time restricted eating and even up to keto diets.
Mm.
And as a nutritional therapist, that's almost like a swear word.
It is like, even I feel a
If
bit
you quite
edgy
like them,
talking about it
I know,
sometimes.
I
Yeah.
know.
I'm just like,
It's
oh,
like break the mold. Let's
thing.
talk about
Yeah.
keto.
Come on, like
Um,
keto.
yeah.
Come on.
I'm working on a program at the moment, which is keto for menopause.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
but my way of doing it is not starting like crazy, just
Mm.
going bang straight into it, because you'll end up feeling poorly, you'll fall off the wagon, you'll end up with some like, nasty keto flu type symptoms. And you will just undo all of your good work, I think.
Hmm.
So the way that I work is a very sort of flexy approach where you start, but you build up to your tolerance of how many carbohydrates that you need. So it's almost like keto in reverse,
Mm-hmm.
and just, you know, building up slowly. And I think that that's the best way to think about fasting. Like we said, it's just
Yeah.
build up to it. Don't just do it because your best mate's doing it, or
Yeah.
you know, someone on TV's told you. I mean, it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll get this, but I find that with my clients, you know, if Davina McCall or Michael Molesley or someone tells them to fast or don't drink or something, they will do it.
Yeah.
If I ask them, they're like, no way. You know, it takes, you know, it's like a massive like battle of wills to try and persuade them.
Yeah.
So I think if you can just prove that it's working in that nice, gentle way, you know,
Yeah.
it's I think it's just a sensible way to do things. Why do we have to throw ourselves in feet first and then, you know, it's so difficult that you don't want to do it? Why not just try things and take those baby steps and find your sweet spot?
And I think we should look at diets as, like we said, with the caffeine and the alcohol, it's like things work until they don't work. And the mince pies, like your mince pie story. Like,
Yeah.
so with diets, that the way I see it, I'm a fan of, I like diets, like, and that's also a swear word, and that's not a good view. But I believe that, you know, a diet here and there, like, just, it's a bit exciting, it's a bit fun, and you can try it and then it'll work. And then, you know, when you're done with it, kind of be done with it. I think that's, if you can kind of play with diets in a safe way, and not get hooked on any, and not, you know, have any unhealthy kind of mental kind of patterns with them. If you can just kind of use them while they're working, and then just kind of come off when you're ready. And I kind of see keto as that. It's kind of like something that you use that's super effective. It does its job, but then just don't do it forever. Like, just kind of come off when it's time to come off. I like it, but then, like I said, diets aren't for everyone, because some people do get caught up in the diet frame of mind, and some people do go back and forth, and it can be a stressful thing for people. But I think if you're in control of your eating habits and you're interested in trying new things, then I like the idea of, you know, putting in a Mediterranean and then a keto, and then maybe, you know, see how you feel about paleo. And like, I kind of like that. I like it. So I like the sound of your program. It sounds nice. Yeah, I can imagine women would respond to it really well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's something that I've worked with clients, and at some point I'll launch it as a thing. But I think it said, just the message is just take things at your own pace.
Yes, that's the
You
key.
don't have to throw yourself in. I mean, I can think of friends of mine who've done diets, and they've bought the book, they've written the recipes out, they've gone to the supermarket, ordered it all, and then just given up after about 3 days.
Yeah. And then they've tried it and it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
So it's about kind of taking your time with it. So I have my final kind of question, and so you are happy with HRT? You're just like, you know, just, you don't have to wrestle it off me. But how do you navigate that with clients? And for anyone listening who's considering it, what would you say to them?
So as a nutritional therapist, I can't advise, recommend, or really say anything meaningful about HRT in terms of what to take, how to take, when to take. I think my experience to clients when they talk to me about HRT, if they're thinking about HRT, I'll, you know, give them recommendations. You know, go and speak to your doctor, and have an open mind.
Right.
Also, if you're thinking about HRT, the British Menopause Society has a patient arm called, gosh, I can't even think what the name is. I can't think what it's called. Oh my goodness, that's just completely disappeared.
I bet you say it every day, and now
I do.
now it's just like,
gosh.
Gone.
Women's. Anyway, you'll find it on the British Menopause Society homepage.
You
I think that's
tell
why
me afterwards. And I'll write it down.
There's a link on there. And they've got loads and loads of fact sheets. They've got, you know, information about HRT, you know, the different types, and it's just a really, really good starting point. to look at things there. But that's a really good place for anything to do with menopause from an HRT client point of view.
Okay.
It's a women's health concern.
Got
There
it.
you go.
Got it. You'll never forget that again, that's for sure.
I won't. I can't even believe I couldn't think about what it was. And it was something women's or initiative or something. But have a look on there, because there's loads of just information to get you started on HRT. My other advice is don't be scared of HRT. There's a lot of bad, or there has been a lot of bad press in the past, but I think things are changing. There's a really good book called Estrogen Matters, which is all about why we need estrogen, and why the research was wrong. And it is do
you remember the author by any chance, or you can just
check it out? I don't, because I can't even spell the author's name.
All right,
pronounce
fine.
it, I think.
I'll find out after, and then I'll put the link.
Yeah, but it's all over Amazon. It's quite a well-known book. And also when it comes to menopause, find your people that you follow. Don't follow everyone because it's all about menopause. You find the people that you like, listen to them, and then kind of just mute the rest, because there are so many mixed messages and different pieces of advice. And it's quite a brutal space, I think, because there's just so much going on, and everyone wants to be heard.
And at a time where a woman really just wants community, and she just wants to look around and see other people going through the same thing, like it can be kind of stressful to have so many different mixed messages. It's like you said about having a child. You look at how to deal with a crying baby, and you get just a million different responses. So I think that's a good call. Pick one direction and kind of go with that. I think that's a really good tip. Is there anything else you want to say on this topic that you think is really important that people should know?
I think one area, which I know you mentioned at the beginning, is about Dutch testing.
Yes, Dutch testing.
And I think testing during menopause is quite controversial, because conventionally it's poo-pooed, I think. And I can sort of understand that, because there isn't one diagnostic test for menopause. You can't do a test to find out if you're in perimenopause, for example. And I think really the value in looking at your estrogen, your testosterone and progesterone is questionable, because they're changing so much. So, how useful is that? But tests like the Dutch test are much more big picture. So when I use tests like that, which look at your adrenal function, so your stress response, it has some nutritional markers, some functional markers like oxidative stress. It looks at your sleep hormone, melatonin, but most importantly, it looks at the balance of your hormones and how you're metabolizing and detoxifying them. So how you use them and how you ship them out in the body. And I think that's really, really important information when you're going through perimenopause, because we talked about looking after your liver and your detoxification and your stress response. This is all information you can find out in a Dutch test. So even if you're not interested in the hormone part, as in the top level hormone values, i.e. how much you've got, because that's going to change every month, the rest of it is just gold, because that can really support your foundation for going through perimenopause.
Right, because
it's a really, really useful test.
It's fab, and I love the way it goes into off the top of my head, like glutathione and B12, I think, is on there, and just some really important markers. And if anything gives you the drive and motivation to make positive lifestyle changes, then getting the results to a Dutch hormone test is the way to go, because if it says your cortisol is off and your stress response is wonky, then you're like, shoot, like the numbers don't lie. I better do something about my lifestyle, like my stress levels. So I think it's a really good thing. And like you said, the way that hormones are metabolized, the way they're shipped out, sometimes they're shipped out safely, sometimes they're not. So it's those things are really important to know.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, is there anything else before I sort of wrap it up? Anything else?
I don't think so. I think everything that we've spoken about today applies to perimenopause, or menopause itself, or postmenopause. The testing is applicable to all the different phases, or even if you're just thinking about, well, why are my hormones imbalanced? You know, a thing is just not quite right. My cycles aren't quite right. The dietary advice and, you know, even the testing advice is still the same. You know, I think it applies to all women from their sort of mid-30s onwards.
It does. So it's a very broad thing, like to talk about, and it's applicable for basically everyone. So let's wrap it up. And where can people find you and find out more about you?
So I'm probably the best place or easiest place is on Instagram, and I'm at menopause nutritionist.
Perfect. Awesome.
So dead easy, hopefully an easy one to remember. Menopause nutritionist. And you can find all my other contact details or website and stuff from there as well.
Fab. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a lovely chat. I knew it would be,
you.
And I feel like we should do this again, because, you know, there's other topics to talk about. So yeah, we'll do it again soon.
Excellent. Thank you.